the legendary tale that started it, all the story behind the 1001 Nights. It begins in ancient Persia with two royal brothers. The elder Shahriyar was the powerful Sultan of Persia. The younger Shazinan was the king of Tartary, a kingdom gifted to him by his loving brother. After 10 long years apart, they longed to see each other. So Shazinan set off on a grand journey to visit the Sultan. But on the very first night, he decided to sneak back to his palace for one last surprise farewell to his queen, whom he adored. Imagine his horror when he walked in to find her sleeping with a common slave. In a blind rage, he killed them both on the spot. He then resumed his journey, but with a heavy heart, cloaked in a deep, unshakable sadness. When he arrived in Persia, Sultan Shahriyar was overjoyed to see his brother, but grew concerned by his profound melancholy. He tried everything to cheer him up: feasts, hunts, grand spectacles, but nothing worked. Shazinan remained lost in his sorrow. Then, one day, just as suddenly as it appeared, the sadness vanished. He was back to his old, cheerful self. The Sultan was baffled. First, this mysterious grief, and now this sudden recovery. He begged his brother for an explanation. Reluctantly, Shazinan confessed the story of his wife's betrayal, but pleaded with the Sultan not to ask how he got over it. This only made Shahriyar more suspicious. He insisted, sensing the secret involved him somehow. Finally, Shazinan gave in. He asked the Sultan to stage a fake hunting trip the next day. As instructed, Shahriyar secretly returned to his brother's apartments, to a hidden closet overlooking his own queen's private gardens. There, with his own eyes, he witnessed a sight that shattered his world. His wife, the Sultaness, being unfaithful with one of her attendants. His own honor was in ruins. Shazinan then explained, "It was seeing your betrayal that cured my sorrow. If even a great and powerful man like you could not escape the infidelity of a woman, I realized it was a common misfortune and foolish for me to grieve any longer." Consumed by rage and grief, Shahriyar executed his unfaithful wife and her lover. He then proposed to his brother that they abandon their thrones and live as hermits, away from the treachery of women. Shazinan agreed, but with one condition: they would return to their kingdoms only if they met someone even more unfortunate than themselves. Disguised, they journeyed to the sea. As dawn broke, a terrifying giant genie rose from the water, carrying a locked glass box on his head. He sat down, unlocked the box, and out stepped a breathtakingly beautiful woman. The genie, who had stolen her on her wedding day, laid his head in her lap and fell asleep. As soon as the genie was snoring, the woman quietly moved his head, went to a chest, and pulled out a string of rings. She counted them 98 in total. She then looked at the sleeping giant and said, "Fool, to think you can keep a woman locked away. Despite your jealousy, each of these rings is from a different lover I've taken while in your care." The two brothers in the tree were her 99th and 100th. After the genie awoke and departed, the brothers came down from the tree. Shahriyar was convinced. This genie, with his 100-fold betrayal, was far more unfortunate than they were. He agreed to return to his capital and resume his rule, but the experience left him forever changed. He devised a cruel plan to ensure he would never be betrayed again. Every single night he would marry a new bride, and every single morning he would have her executed. The kingdom was plunged into terror. Every family with a beautiful daughter lived in fear. The people's love for their sultan turned to hatred, but no one dared to defy him. This is when a hero emerges from the most unexpected place. Scheherazade, the brilliant and brave daughter of the Grand Vizier, the very man tasked with carrying out the execution steps forward. She has a plan to end the bloodshed, her plan to offer herself as the Sultan's next bride. Her father was horrified, but Scheherazade was determined. She believed she could save the women of her kingdom with the power of a story, and that is where the 1001 Nights truly begin. Once upon a time, in a land of wonders, there lived a sultan named Shahryar. His heart was hardened by betrayal, and he had made a terrible vow. Each day he would marry a new bride, only to have her executed the very next morning. The kingdom was gripped by fear and sorrow, as family after family lost a daughter to the Sultan's cruel decree. One day, to the horror of the Grand Vizier, his own daughter, the wise and beautiful Scheherazade, announced her intention to marry the Sultan. The Vizier pleaded with her, even telling her a cautionary tale to dissuade her. He spoke of a farmer who could understand the language of animals. The farmer overheard an ass giving bad advice to an ox, telling it to refuse to work. The next day, the lazy ass was forced to do the ox's hard labor, learning a harsh lesson about meddling in others' affairs. The vizier warned Scheherazade that her own stubbornness would lead to a terrible fate. He then continued the farmer's story. The farmer's wife saw him burst into laughter one day after hearing another animal conversation. He had overheard the clever ass trick the ox back into working by telling it the farmer planned to have it butchered if it remained defiant. The farmer found this hilarious, but his wife became obsessed with knowing the reason for his laughter. The farmer explained that revealing the secret would cost him his life, but she wouldn't listen. Distraught, the farmer was about to give in when he overheard his dog complaining to a rooster about the situation. The rooster scoffed, saying, "My master can't even manage one wife, while I handle 50. He should just take a stick to her, and she learn her place." The farmer took the rooster's advice. His wife quickly changed her tune, and the secret remained safe. The vizier finished his tale, telling Scheherazade that if she persisted, she would be treated just as stubbornly. But Scheherazade was unswayed. Her mind was set. With a heavy heart, the vizier presented his daughter to Sultan Shahryar. The Sultan was captivated by her beauty, but warned the vizier that the vow would not be broken. Scheherazade would die at dawn, and the vizier himself would have to be the one to carry out the sentence. Even with this threat, Scheherazade remained calm. As she was led to the royal chambers, she made a simple request to the Sultan. Could her younger sister, Dinazade, be allowed to visit her one last time before dawn to say farewell? The Sultan, intrigued by this unusual bride, agreed. An hour before sunrise, Dinarzade entered the chamber as planned. But instead of tearful goodbyes, she made an even stranger request. "My dear sister," she said, "before we part forever, would you tell me one of the many wonderful stories you know?" The Sultan, who was still awake, was surprised. He was curious to hear what kind of story would be requested at such a moment. Seeing his interest, Scheherazade looked at him and, with a glimmer of hope, began her tale. What story could she possibly tell to save her own life? The fate of the kingdom rested on the words she was about to speak.
There was formerly a merchant whose extensive traffic obliged him to travel to many places, in one of which journeys, finding himself much incommoded by the heat of the day, he alighted from his horse and sat down in a shady grove. When taking some dates out of his portmanteau, he ate them, throwing the shells on each side of him. When he had done eating, being a good Mussulman, he washed his hands and feet at an adjoining rivulet, and said his prayers. While he was yet on his knees, a monstrous genie, all white with age, advanced toward him with a scimitar in his hand, and uttering a frightful cry, exclaimed, "Rise up, that I may kill thee, as thou hast killed my son." The merchant, terrified as much at his appearance as at his threats, protested his innocence. "How," exclaimed the genie, "did you not, even now, throw about the shells of your dates? My son was passing by, and you threw one of them into his eye, which killed him. Therefore I must kill thee," saying which he took the merchant by the arm, threw him on the ground, and lifted up the scimitar to cut off his head. In this imminent danger, the merchant earnestly entreated permission to return home, and settle his affairs, and take leave of his family. "What time do you require?" said the genie. "I ask." "A year," replied the merchant. "I swear by Allah that this day 12th I will return under these trees, to put myself into your hands." Upon this, the genie disappeared. The merchant returned home disconsolate. Fiam employed the allotted time in properly regulating his affairs, and when it was near expired, he took a sorrowful leave of his family, and arrived at the place where he had promised to meet the genie. While he was waiting for his dreaded approach, he saw two old men coming toward him from different quarters, the first leading a hind, the second two black dogs. They approach the trees where the unfortunate mare, Int, was sitting, when one of them said to him, "Brother, why do you stay in this place? Do you not know that a number of evil spirits resort to it, and that it is by no means safe to continue here?" "Alas," said the merchant, "I know that but too well." He then related his story to the old men, who, having heard it, agreed to continue with him until the genie should appear. In a little time they perceived a thick vapor advancing toward them, which, vanishing all at once, discovered Teen Genie. Without noticing the old men, he took the merchant by the arm, saying, "Kais, that I may kill thee, as thou didst kill my son." The merchant filled the air with his cries, and the old men, prostrating themselves on the ground, entreated for him. The genie, with some difficulty, was persuaded to listen to their expostulations, and at length to agree that if their several adventures were more surprising than that of the merchant, he would relent and set him at liberty day. Advancing, the Sultan arose, and the vizier, in much affliction, entered into his presence, in full expectation of receiving the usual fatal orders. But the Sultan was so much taken with the beauty and accomplishments of his lady, and his curiosity was so much excited by the interesting story she had begun, that he became irresolute respecting his vow, and talking to his trembling vizier on other affairs. He left him in suspense, also, as to the fate of his beloved daughter. The next morning, Scheherazade resumed her narrative with the history of. If you liked the video, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and hit.
"I married," began the first old man, "in my early life, my cousin, with whom I lived more than 20 years in much happiness. The only thing that abated it was that we had no children. The desire of posterity induced me to buy a slave, by whom I shortly had a son. I still lived in great harmony with my wife, who always treated the slave kindly, and appeared to be very fond of my boy. Some years after his birth I was obliged to go a long journey, and on my return, my wife told me that my son and my slave were both dead. I lamented their loss very much, but the feast of Bairam approaching, I thought it my duty to overcome my sorrow, and prepare for the holy festival. Accordingly I gave orders to my farmer to bring up one of the fattest cows, to sacrifice at the commencement of the solemnity. He obeyed, but when the cow was brought to me she bellowed piteously, and I could perceive tears run down from her eyes. Struck with so singular a spectacle, and moved, F knew not how, one was about to send the cow back and order another, when my wife opposed any exchange with great vehemence. I suffered myself to be prevailed on, and though I could not kill her myself, I ordered my farmer to do so, who obeyed me. When she was slain, it was found, notwithstanding her plump appearance, that she was mere skin and bone, and wholly unfit for the intended sacrifice. I immediately sent for another fat beast. When the farmer brought a calf, whose behaviour was still more extraordinary, he broke the cord, ran to me, and fell at my feet. I determined to listen to the impulse I felt in favour of this calf, and accordingly ordered him to be taken back, although my wife interfered with still greater eagerness, and insisted that he should be slaughtered. The day following, my farmer desired to speak with me alone. He took me to his own habitation, and introduced me to his daughter. By her I was informed that during my journey my wife had learned the black art, and by that means had transformed my slave into the cow we had unfortunately slaughtered the day before, and my son into the calf which had so narrowly escaped. I leave you to judge, powerful genie, how much I was distressed at this account, but not doubting my informer was able to restore my son, as she had the skill to discover his situation, I very earnestly besought her assistance on 2 conditions. Replied she, I will restore him. First, that you give him me for a husband, and secondly, that you permit me to punish, as she deserves, the wicked enchantress who has transformed him. I consented. She then pronounced certain words, and sprinkling my son with water, he resumed his shape. He joyfully married his fair benefactress, who changed my wicked wife into the hind you see here. The story op the old man with the 2 black dogs, prince of genii. Said the second old man, these dogs and myself are brothers. On the death of our father we divided his substance among us, and each received 1,000 sequins. One of my brothers resolved to travel, laid out his money in goods suited to the country he intended to visit, and departed. After a year's absence, he returned in great distress, having lost all his effects. Meantime, by industry, I had acquired an additional 1,000 sequins, which I readily gave him. My other brother, not disheartened by the ill success of the first, pursued the same measures. Very shortly he also returned entirely ruined. To him also I gave another 1,000 sequins. We then agreed to remain at home, and pursue our business carefully, without seeking further adventures. Some years afterward, both my brothers besought me to join with them in a trading voyage. Their importunity prevailed. I disposed of my stock, which now produced 6,000 sequins, half of which I buried in a corner of the house, and gave each of my brothers 1,000 of the remainder. We arrived safely at our destined port, where we sold our adventures to good profit. When we were nearly ready to return, I met on the banks of the sea a lady, handsome, but poorly clad, who very earnestly persuaded me to marry her. I consented, and having taken her on board the vessel, we set sail. My wife proved to be possessed of so many good qualities that I became every day more fond of her. My unworthy brothers, envying my superior good fortune, seized us both while asleep, and threw us into the sea. But little did these bad men imagine the punishment that awaited their cruelty and ingratitude. My wife was a fairy. She conveyed me home, and conducted the vessel, which had ray goods on board, safe into port. Before one knew of its arrival, 2 black dogs came crouching to me in the most submissive manner. These, said the fairy, are your brothers. Thus is their wickedness requited, and it is one part of their punishment, that in this degraded state they must look for support and protection to the brother they so basely betrothed. The genie thought these adventures so singular that he remitted the punishment of the merchant and disappeared. And the merchant, after suitably thanking his benefactors, returned home again with joy to his family. The Sultan was delighted with these stories. He requested Scheherazade to proceed next night to another, and going into the divan the vizier, his family, the court, and the people in general were overjoyed to find that he gave no orders to put the beautiful sultaness to death. If you liked the video,
"Prince of Genii," said the second old man, "these dogs and myself are brothers. On the death of our father, we divided his substance among us, and each received 1,000 sequins. One of my brothers resolved to travel, laid out his money and goods suited to the country he intended to visit, and departed. After a year's absence, he returned in great distress, having lost all his effects. Meantime, by industry, I had acquired an additional 1,000 sequins, which I readily gave him. My other brother, not disheartened by the ill success of the first, pursued the same measures. Very shortly he also returned entirely ruined. To him also I gave another 1,000 sequins. We then agreed to remain at home and pursue our business carefully, without seeking further adventures. Some years afterward, both my brothers besought me to join with them in a trading voyage. Their importunity prevailed. I disposed of my stock, which now produced 6,000 sequins, half of which I buried in a corner of the house, and gave each of my brothers 1,000 of the remainder. We arrived safely at our destined port, where we sold our adventures to good profit. When we were nearly ready to return, I met on the banks of the sea a lady, handsome, but poorly clad, who very earnestly persuaded me to marry her. I consented, and having taken her on board the vessel, we set sail. My wife proved to be possessed of so many good qualities that I became every day more fond of her. My unworthy brothers, envying my superior good fortune, seized us both while asleep and threw us into the sea. But little did these bad men imagine the punishment that awaited their cruelty and ingratitude. My wife was a fairy. She conveyed me home and conducted the vessel, which had ray goods on board, safe into port. Before I knew of its arrival, 2 black dogs came crouching to me in the most submissive manner. "These," said the fairy, "are your brothers. Thus is their wickedness requited, and it is one part of their punishment, that in this degraded state they must look for support and protection to the bayadha they so basely betraj carat ed." The genie thought these adventures so singular that he remitted the punishment of the merchant and disappeared, and the merchant, after suitably thanking his benefactors, returned home again with joy to his family. The Sultan was delighted with these stories. He requested Scheherazade to proceed next night to another, and going into the divan, the vizier, his family, the court, and the people in general were overjoyed to find that he gave no orders to put the beautiful sultaness to death. Imagine a poor, old fisherman, his back bent by years of toil, casting his net into the sea. Day after day, he followed the same ritual, his livelihood depending on the whims of the ocean. He had a rule: cast his net only 4 times a day, no more, no less. On this particular day, the first 3 casts brought up nothing but mud, a dead donkey, and broken pottery. His heart grew heavy. With one final cast left, he whispered a prayer and hauled his net with all his might. It was incredibly heavy. Hope flickered in his chest. Could this be the catch that would change his fortune? He dragged the net ashore and peered inside. There, gleaming amidst the seaweed and shells, was a copper vessel, sealed with a lead stopper bearing the ancient and powerful seal of Solomon. The fisherman was overjoyed. This vessel must be worth a fortune. He could sell it and provide for his family for months. But curiosity, a powerful force, began to bubble within him. What could be inside? He decided to open it. Perhaps it was filled with gold or precious jewels. Using his knife, he pried at the lead stopper. It was stubborn, but with a final grunt of effort, it popped free. He tilted the vessel, expecting a trickle of coins or a cascade of gems. Instead, a thick, dense smoke billowed out, spiraling high into the sky, forming a colossal, terrifying cloud. The fisherman stumbled back, his eyes wide with fear. The smoke then condensed, coalescing into a gigantic, monstrous being, a genie, an ifrit, whose head was in the clouds and whose feet were planted firmly on the ground. His eyes glowed like embers, and his voice boomed like thunder. The fisherman, trembling, could barely stand. He managed to stammer, "Great Ifrit, I thank the heavens for this day. Will you not reward me for freeing you from your long imprisonment?" The genie's laughter was a chilling, terrible sound that echoed across the shore. "Reward you?" he bellowed. "Foolish mortal. Prepare to die." The fisherman was stunned. Die? But I am your rescuer. Why would you kill me? The genie's face contorted with rage. For centuries, I have been trapped in that wretched bottle, he explained. For the first 100 years, I vowed to grant my rescuer eternal riches. No one came. For the next 100, I promised to grant them all the treasures of the earth. Still, no one came. After another century, I swore I would grant them 3 wishes, whatever they might be. But no one came. The genie's voice dropped to a menacing growl. Finally, consumed by rage and despair, I made a new vow. I swore that I would kill the one who finally freed me, allowing them only to choose the manner of their death. You, fisherman, are that person. So, tell me, how do you wish to die? The fisherman's mind raced. He was facing a being of immense power, driven by an ancient, burning anger. A direct plea for mercy was useless. He had to be clever. A spark of an idea ignited in his mind. He looked at the genie with feigned disbelief. You wish to kill me? I find that hard to believe from one so great, the fisherman said, his voice surprisingly steady. But before you do, I must ask one question, for my own curiosity. I simply cannot believe that a being as vast and mighty as you could ever have fit inside this tiny copper vessel. It seems impossible. The genie scoffed. Impossible? You doubt my power? You dare to question me? It's not that I doubt you, the fisherman replied calmly, but my eyes cannot comprehend it. Unless I see it with my own eyes, I will never believe that all of you could fit into this small flask. The genie, his pride stung, roared, Then watch, you ignorant fool, and witness my power. In an instant, the colossal figure began to dissolve. The monstrous form dissipated back into a thick column of smoke, which swirled and funneled itself, pouring back into the narrow opening of the copper vessel on the sand. The fisherman watched, his heart pounding in his chest, as the last wisp of smoke was drawn inside. He didn't hesitate for a second. With lightning speed, he lunged forward, grabbed the lead stopper with the seal of Solomon, and slammed it back into the mouth of the flask, sealing the furious genie inside once more. The genie's muffled roars of rage echoed from within the vessel. Let me out, fisherman. I will reward you. I will make you rich beyond your wildest dreams. But the fisherman was no longer a fool. He had learned a valuable lesson. Oh, mighty genie, he called out, his voice now firm and confident. I heard your story of broken vows. You had centuries to plan my reward, but chose my death instead. Now you will remain in this prison, a warning to all about the consequences of ingratitude. The genie begged and pleaded, promising all the wonders of the world, but the fisherman's mind was made up. He picked up the heavy vessel. He could have sold it, but he knew the danger it contained was too great. He walked to the edge of the water and, with all his strength, hurled the copper flask back into the deepest part of the sea, where it would remain, hopefully, for all eternity. The fisherman, though still poor, returned home that day a much wiser man. He had faced death and outsmarted a powerful being not with strength, but with wit and courage. His story teaches us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, a clever mind can be the most powerful weapon of all. It's a timeless reminder that quick thinking and ingenuity can triumph where brute force fails.
There was a king of Greece who was sorely afflicted with a grievous leprosy. His physicians had exerted all their art in vain. His case was declared hopeless, and Ha expected every day to sink under the loathsome disease which oppressed him. At this time there came to his court a strange Phaciscian named Doban, who, after examining the patient, asserted that, so far from the king being incurable, he would undertake to restore his health without either inward potions or outward applications. This extraordinary proposal was readily accepted. The physician prepared a racket, and besought the king to play at tennis with it. I have lodged, said he, certain drugs in the handle, which is hollow. When these are heated, they will penetrate 3 Majesty's whole frame. Leave off then, bathe, and retire to rest, and tomorrow you will find yourself perfectly cured. The king followed the direction of Doban, and rose the next morning entirely free from his malady. The physician was invested with the most distinguished honors. The king loaded him also with riches, and the courtiers with caresses. He became the declared favorite, and every one who had a suit to prefer to the king solicited the interest of the physician. But amid all his prosperity, lurked the most fatal destruction. The Grecian king was a very weak prince, easily irritated and tyrannical in his disposition. His former favorites envied Dobon and seized every opportunity to excite distrust of him in the royal breast. "He is become," said they, "next in dignity and power to yourself. As he cured you in a manner so simple, may he not also by methods as unsuspected cut off your majesty, who alone stands between him and the throne?" For a long time the Grecian king repelled these insinuations. "Were I to listen to you," said he to his courtiers, "I should be like a certain man who had a faithful parrot, who reported to him the incontinence of his wife during his absence. The wife, enraged at the telltale, contrived a method of destroying the credit of the bird, and being revenged at the same time. Accordingly, when her husband went another journey, she caused a slave to scatter water over the cage all night, in the manner of rain, while others produced plus or minus the appearance of thunder and lightning. The next day, when the husband returned, the parrot complained of having been exposed all night to the fury of a continual storm. As the master knew the weather had been exceedingly fine, he hastily concluded that his bird was false, and in resentment put it to death. But the future ill conduct of his wife too soon proved to him his parrot's truth and his own rashness. "Sir," replied his vizier, "it is my duty to be particularly attentive to your safety, nor must I suffer you to be led by specious appearances into real danger." The vizier of a neighboring king was entrusted with the care of his master's only son, and so ill did he perform that duty, that he suffered the young prince to separate from his train, in the eagerness of the chase, till he was left alone and had lost his way. While he rode about, he came up to a handsome lady who appeared to be in great distress. The prince was naturally compassionate. He heard her tale, and at her request took her upon his horse, which he guided by her direction. They came at length to the ruins of a castle in a lonely place, where the lady desired him to alight. He obeyed. The lady entered the ruins, and while he was securing his horse, he heard her say softly, "Be glad, my children. I have brought you a handsome young man, very fat." Other voices immediately answered, "Mamma, where is he? Let us eat him presently, for we are very hungry." The prince heard enough to convince him of his deed. He perceived that the supposed distressed lady was really an ogress, wife to one of those savage demons called ogres, who frequent remote places and use 1,000 wiles to surprise and devour passengers. He began to untie his horse again with all diligence, putting up all the while prayers to heaven for his deliverance. The ogress, returning to the door, never doubted but B was still employed in fastening his horse, and hearing him utter prayers, she also pretended to put up ejaculations. But the prince was not to be deceived by this hypocrisy. Having loosened the rein, he leaped upon the saddle, and was soon out of the monster's power. But although he escaped unhurt, his royal father was so much enraged at the danger he had been in, that he very justly caused his careless vizier to be put to death. I should deserve the same punishment if I did not protest against the conduct of Dobon, who, though as specious as the ogress, may be equally dangerous. The credulous Grecian king began at length to listen to these insinuations, which the vizier, observing, so inflamed his passions that he caused his benefactor to be seized and brought into his presence to be put to death. Dobon, astonished at so fatal a denunciation, solicited earnestly for mercy, but in vain. "You see," said the fisherman to the genie, "how the king treated his benefactor. So have you also behaved to me." When Dobon found himself in the hands of the executioner, he once more applied himself to the king, requesting he would, at least, allow him to live till the next day. "I have," said he to the cruel prince, "among my books one well worthy of your majesty's acceptance. If, when my head is struck off, you will open the book at the 6th leaf, and read the 3rd line, my head will answer any question you shall ask the king." Though insensible to pity or to gratitude, was moved B.J. a frivolous curiosity to defer the execution. The following day, when Dobon was brought into the royal presence, he renewed his supplication for life, reminded the king of his services, and in the most earnest manner protested his innocence. The unworthy prince told him plainly that all he could say was in vain. "Were it only," continued he, "to hear your head speak after it is cut off. It is my pleasure you should be put to death." The physician, seeing his fate inevitable, submitted. He presented a large folio to the king. "Place my head," said he, "for a moment on the cover of this book, and I shall be in a condition to answer your questions." The executioner performed his office, and the head being placed as directed, the blood stanched, the eyes opened, and it called upon the king to open the book. The king obeyed, but finding the leaves stick together, he put his finger to his mouth and wetted it to separate them. When he came to the 6th leaf, he said, "Please, physician, there is nothing written here." "Turn over leaf by leaf," said the head, "till you come to the writing." The king continued to turn over the leaves, putting his finger continually to his mouth, till the poison with which each leaf was impregnated took effect. The asterisk head, perceiving that the king had but few moments to live, exclaimed, "Tyrant, you are justly punished." Having said this, its eyes closed, and it remained without life. The king, also, in a short time, fell down and expired. "You find, genie," said the fisherman, "that though the physician could not preserve his life, he contrived to punish his ungrateful murderer. I am more fortunate in being now out of your power, and having you in mine. I am now about to return you to the sea." "My good friend," replied the genie, "remember, revenge is forbidden. Do not treat me as Imama did." "How was that?" asked the fisherman. "Ho," replied the genie, "do you think I can tell stories in this confinement? Let me out, and I will tell you as many as you please." "No," said the fisherman, "I will not let you out. On the contrary, I will this moment cast you back into the sea." "Hear me, I charge," exclaimed the genie. "If thou wilt deliver me, I swear in the most solemn manner that I will not hurt thee. On the contrary, I will teach thee how to become as rich as thou desirest to be." Overcome by this promise, the fisherman once more opened the vessel, and the genie, resuming his form, instantly kicked it into the sea. The fisherman was alarmed at this action, but the genie assured him he was safe. He then led him up a mountain, from whence they descended to a great pond that lay between 4 hills. "Cast in thy nets here," said the genie, "and carry the fish thou shalt take to the Sultan, who will liberally reward thee. Only beware not to throw in thy nets more than once a day, or thou wilt repent it." Having said this, the genie disappeared. The fisherman immediately threw in his nets. But though the pond seemed to abound with fish, he caught only 4. He was much pleased to find them unusually beautiful, and each of a different color, one being white, one red, one blue, and one yellow. Having much admired them, he set off for the palace, to present them to the Sultan. The singular beauty of the fish made them very acceptable. The liberal prince rewarded the fishermen with 400 pieces of gold, and ordered them to be served as a part of the entertainment of the day. But an amazing prodigy disappointed the Sultan. As the cook was frying the fish, on turning them the wall of the kitchen opened, and a beautiful young lady entered, holding a rod of myrtle in her hand, and advancing to the pan, she struck one of the fish, saying, "Fish, fish, are ye in your duty?" When the 4 fish, lifting up their heads together, said, "Yes, yes, if you reckon, we reckon. If you fly, we overcome, and are content." As soon as they had thus spoken, the lady overturned the frying pan and passed again through the wall, which closed immediately and became as before. The cook was exceedingly terrified, but recovering herself and picking up the fish, she had the misfortune to find that they were burnt to a cinder and utterly unfit to be served at the royal table. She was under the necessity of relating the phenomenon to the vizier. That minister invented an excuse which satisfied the Sultan, but being very desirous of seeing so strange a scene, he ordered the fisherman to provide him for other fish of the same sort, as soon as possible. The day following, the fisherman obeyed the vizier's orders, and to his great joy received another 400 pieces of gold. The vizier shut himself up with the cook, who placed the fish on the fire, and on turning them, when fried on one side, the wall again opened. The lady appeared the same. Dialogue passed between her and the fish. When having overturned the pan, she retired, and the wall closed, as on the preceding day. The vizier, astonished beyond measure at so great a prodigy, failed not to relate the matter to the Sultan. That prince was equally surprised and impatient to see so strange a scene himself. The fisherman provided 4 more fish on the following day, and again received a sum which was to him quite a treasure. The Sultan, attended by his vizier, retired into his closet. The fish were placed on the fire, and on turning them, the wall opened. But instead of the young lady, there came out a gigantic black, in the habit of a slave, who advanced with an air of anger to the pan, and touching one of the fish, said, in a terrible voice, "Fish, are thee in your duty?" At these words, the fish raised up their heads, and answered, "Yes, yes, we are. If you reckon, we reckon. If you pay your debts, we why ours. If you fly, we overcome, and are content." To black then threw the pan into the middle of the closet, and the fish were reduced to coal. Having done this, he read fiercely, and the wall shut, and remained as before. When the Sultan recovered from his astonishment, he sent for the fisherman to know where he caught these extraordinary fish, and finding it was near the city, he ordered his usual retinue, and set off immediately. On ascending the mountain, the pond, and an immense plain beyond it, presented themselves, which no one remembered to have seen before. The Sultan ordered his court to encamp by the side of the pond, and retired to his pavilion with his vizier. To him the Sultan declared his resolution of exploring, alone, this new-discovered plain, in hopes of finding out the cause of so many wonderful events. He commanded the vizier to detain his attendants on that spot, and to excuse to them his not appearing under the pretense of his being indisposed. At the dawn of the morning, the Sultan set forward, and by sunrise he saw before him a great building, which roved to be a magnificent palace of black marble. As the gates were open, the prince entered, but met no any living creature. He wandered through many spacious apartments, all furnished in the most splendid manner, and kept in the most exact order. He called out aloud, but no one answered. After walking about a long time, he grew weary, and sitting down was beginning to reflect on the wonders which had happened, when he was interrupted by the voice of one complaining. He listened attentively, and following the sound, he came to a magnificent